come to be a person of the theater? What is your origin story in the theater?
So I think just entertaining as a whole has always been kind of a big part of my life and my family's life. My parents owned a DJ company when I was really young, and would do weddings and parties and all these different events. And so it was always the thing to be like on and entertaining and tell stories and socialize and have a really good time. So that was something that we were just brought up with, and I enjoyed it so much. I loved watching my parents do it, and I really wanted to do that as well. And my parents encouraged me to do that all throughout my childhood. And I don't think it was until I got into maybe high school where I had kind of was like, oh, theater is like a thing that I can actually do all the time. And I partook in like a lot of different shows and musicals in high school. And then that was actually how I ended up getting my scholarship for college. So I had just thought, if this is something that I can do, I can make a living off of, I can have a really good time, I can meet people, and I can go different places. It's something that I want to do for the rest of my life. So it just started with my parents, and my dad had like an 8-track on one side and like a Discman on the other, and like all these big heavy speakers. And I just knew, I was like, I want to do something along the lines of this.
Oh, I love that. Does that mean that music was wedded into your idea of the theater from the very beginning?
Absolutely. Yeah. Music has always been a huge part of how we communicate, how we spend time with one another in my home, and with my family. It
Mhm.
is very much who we are. I don't think there's any one of our family members who doesn't like music. And my parents, we did get to listen to like some of the newer artists, but we listened to a lot of classics. They wanted to make sure that our foundation of music was very strong.
Gotcha. So you were steeped in the music history, even as I
Mhm.
imagine as DJs, your parents were playing popular music as well. So you're
Yeah,
getting sort of both sides of things.
yeah, definitely.
I love that. And then when you went to college for formal theater training, do you feel like though that world of music and that world of the theater like meshed really easily for you? Was it sometimes challenging to travel between the worlds?
It was definitely challenging because there were not a lot of shows that featured people who look like me.
Mm.
And so sometimes that was very difficult. Um, I, I often wasn't cast in a lot of shows, or was only cast in a certain type of show. And so I had really left it up to myself to make it a goal to try and tell stories of women who look like me, and for the look of theater to be more universal and to be more diverse in what's going on in our current world. I don't think, Lady Day is something that's often seen in the theater world, or maybe seen in certain cities. So it was really an honor for me to, one, be able to present to younger girls in the community a story where they can kind of look up and relate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that was just not something that I had in my educational background, not at least in Colorado. When I did study in Australia, in Perth, Australia, they have an entire major that is dedicated to the Aboriginal community, and you can only be a part of that culture if you, or you can only be a part of that major if you relate, or if you are a part of that community. So that was really cool to see. That was just not something that I had seen here. So they have their
Mm.
own stories that they tell from their ancestry, and it's very much so celebrated there.
Yeah, I can imagine how that would have given you this different sort of information or tracker way of turning on the question of representation and authentic stories and who gets to be seen.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I think is really interesting, Cherish, and it connects to what you were just saying, is you have at the very beginning of your bio that you think of your work as that of a community activist, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is expansive beyond in addition to thinking of yourself as a performer, and an actor. And how does the fact that you think of yourself as a community activist manifest? Is it the type of roles you choose, the type of projects you're excited about? Does it go with you during a theatrical process?
I think it definitely goes with me during a theatrical process. I do also think it's like the work that I try to promote in the community. I try to make it a really big point to tell parents and other students that if you're not involved in the arts in some way, you should be. There's just so much to learn. There's so many ways to just have some self growth. Um, especially for parents who are like, my kid's just not the athlete, just not, or my child is a little has challenges with socializing or making friends or being creative, or reading and literacy. Like all those things are found within the arts. And so, for parents who struggle to find that niche for their kids or for something for them to do through the summers or during the school year, I always encourage, like, you should look at some of the local theaters in the community and you should be involved in the camps, or you should go to some of these different shows. Like, it's pretty rare, I think, to see the younger community in some of these shows that we're producing. In I think that they should definitely be there, and they should also be able to have a voice in what happens in the future of our art.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're thinking about that. And that is like a really big question, I think, the American theater is often asking itself, right, about like where are the audiences in their 20s, but folks are not always doing what you're doing, which is thinking about how does that start with young people in their tens and in their teens.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, a lot of these community centers as well, a lot of these parents who are either single parents or they're maybe come from a two-parent home, but both parents work. And they're at these different community centers and they're looking for things for them to do. Like, the theater is a great place for them to be at. Opening up a script and creating your own show is a fantastic way to spend your time.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes you a better human. It makes you a better person, and it allows you to just contribute just beautiful color to the world.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really striking about Lady Day, and we'll get back to sort of the genesis of the project in a bit, because I think it's really important and lovely for the folks here to hear a little bit more about how Day came to be done at this time. But one of the things I hear you saying about getting young people involved is also that it's like an ensemble communal experience. You mentioned it in contrast with athletics, right, which we often think about as a team. And I'm interested in, so many of the other shows that we mentioned when we talked about your bio, the musical theater shows, there's a real sense of ensemble and group. And Lady Day, what ensemble means is a little different. Do you think of Lady Day as having a community? What are the bits that feel like a communal or ensemble experience? And what are the bits that feel like it's just you having to
Yeah.
carry?
Yeah, I definitely think it was a communal experience. Like, I've got to meet and hear from people who may have seen or heard Lady Day, or may have attended one of her shows, or used to listen to her on the radio, or used to go to like the Cotton Club that was in town. And I've gotten to hear some of their experiences. I've gotten to share a lot of stories with the jazz and blues community here. Like, that's been very, very honorable to see. Um, that's been really cool to see and really cool to hear their stories.
Mm.
Um, and so part of, I think, you know, we're able to, through Lady Day, build more of that community and like maybe shed a little bit of light of like, this is maybe something we want to see a little bit more of. Like, why don't we should be enjoying like more jazz in the parks and
Mhm.
more blues in the parks, or we should be able to like share some of these stories of like what was it like in the 40s and the 50s,
Mhm.
in some of these clubs and some of these different scenes. So that part I feel is a big part of the community. I also think it's been really lovely to see a lot more people of color in the theater, which is just not something, I tell people all the time, we're, as actors, we are not supposed to be looking out in the crowd, and that's part of the reason it's dark. But I know for many of us who are actors of color, when we're able to, we kind of look out and we count and we go, wow, how many people are out there that look like me? And it's not normally two hands. It's normally one hand. And so it's very dark in the shot, so I can't see anybody. But sometimes after the show, it has been really cool to see people who look like me, who have never, they didn't even know the End Center existed, or they knew where it was, but they didn't know what happened there. Or, you know, they just weren't aware that there were shows out there like this. And so that's really exciting to see that we were providing a new experience for this community. And I'm hoping that that just continues more and more and more as time goes on. And then there's definitely bits of it that I definitely feel are just me up there, or just me and just Lady. I often talk to Lady Day in my head, just me and Billy, especially during like some of those more difficult scenes, and just promising her that I'm going to be very honest, as honest as I possibly can be with her story. And so that's sometimes the part where I feel very isolated. And, you know, I think that was how she felt. She searched for love her entire life. And she never, I don't think she ever really got it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so much to hold. Before, I'd love to go and thank you for being so vulnerable and open about that, about both pieces, both the community that you're feeling and like who is out in the audience, and then also vulnerable about your experience on stage, Cherish. That's lovely. Before I think I want to come back around to both of those really juicy bits, but I think before, maybe to give our lovely folks in the room a little bit of context, can you tell a little bit of the story of like, how did Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill come to happen? Like, what is your history with Billie Holiday and this particular piece? And then how did it come to be at TheaterWorks?
Yeah. So my Billy is an idol of mine and always has been. As in my younger period of time, I did not know her full story. I don't think I'm confident my parents would not have told me her full story of exactly what had happened, and how really traumatic her life was, her entire life. I just knew that I loved the way she sounded. I loved what she stood for. I loved that she was a very no nonsense, very unapologetic, strong woman, who made history. I mean, the feds were searching the country for this woman to get her to stop singing a song. She was making moves by singing, and that was very impactful for me. And the song she sang was "Strange Fruit." That's the song that she is best known for. And it's still pretty relative today. I mean, if you were to play that song and you kind of look at what's going on in our world, it fits in, unfortunately. And I wish it didn't, but I really wanted to be able to tell her story. That's always kind of been a dream of mine, is to be able to do that. And so a couple years ago, it had been vetted to a couple of different theater companies. And there were just it was very difficult to cast, because it was really important that the pianist was Black, or a person of color. But more specifically, I had told Caitlin, like, I feel in my heart that somebody who wasn't Black probably would not have played for her. And if I tell her story, I have to be honest. I have to, be able to give as much truth to it as I possibly could. And that was really difficult in our community to do. There are not a lot of Black pianists in Colorado Springs who read music very well, or who play jazz, or who play blues. So that was really difficult to find. There were not a lot of individuals who play piano who were in the theater world. They may have played at church, or they may have played like for a band or something, but they didn't know a whole bunch about the theater world. And so it was just quite a few conflicts that were pretty challenging. And then COVID hit, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'll never do theater again. I just started. And I was so heartbroken. And I know a lot of us were. I mean, it's been very, very difficult for the theater world in figuring out what do we do with all we know with our lives? This is our entire life's work. This is what we audition for. This is what we work hard for. This is what we work out for those of us who dance, and for those of us who are even behind the scenes, like this is their life's work, and it was just put to a stop still. And I think it ended up working out in our favor because Caitlin had contacted me and she's like, hey, I know you have been trying to do Lady Day. And Lady Day is great because it just involves two people with good amount of space, um, so that everybody can stay safe. It's a really good show. And it brought light to, again, what is happening in our world and in our nation right now. And I was like, I would love to. Oh my gosh, please, let's do it. And so we had gone on the hunt to find a pianist, and it was really challenging to try and find the right fit. And I'm very musically picky. I'm very kind with a lot of other things, but if I am searching for a very specific sound, I want that and that only sound, and we will work on it over and over and over again until it's right. And so we also needed somebody who was going to be able to work with me that way, with just how specific I wanted things to sound with the acoustics. And Earl Schaefer Jr., who's our pianist, he plays Jimmy, and I had worked with him before, and I just thought, man, I think it would really work if we're able to get him to play for us. And we had asked, and he was like, yes, absolutely, I would love to do that. And we kind of just developed our story from there. Lynn Hastings is our director and is phenomenal and has just really held my hand a lot during this entire process and guided me to be able to create this story in a way that it's really meant to be told. And so, Caitlin is phenomenal about picking very specific people for this puzzle piece shape, and everything seemed to fit so perfectly. And I think that's why we have such a good show now. But it was definitely challenging. I mean, there was COVID challenges, there was casting challenges. With theater, there's always money challenges. With the arts, there's always money challenges. But so everything kind of just ended up working out so wonderfully. And I could not have asked for a better show.
It's really to hear, because all of what you just said, Cherish about Lynn and Earl it's so lovely and true, and they're both such wonderful artists. And watching the way in which you three especially collaborate together, something that I think about COVID, and sometimes the offerings that when artists like yourself are like, this is very important to me, this part of the story. So for example, the pianist has to be Black, and they have to be someone who's going to be able to work in that jazz vernacular, that like Earl has been playing piano since like the dawn of his life. He is such
Yeah.
a talented artist, and yet because of how he grew up in his tradition of music, he doesn't work through reading music as much as he works through ear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think pre-COVID and pre some of these big questions about like what is the heart of the story and like how do we work together to get to it, I think the idea of like a pianist on a theatrical production who did not read music would have really freaked me out as a producer. I would have been like, is everybody going to be okay? Is this going to work? And yet, COVID has, I think, taught us some lessons of like flexibility or nimbleness,
Mm-hmm.
and then also pushed us to be like, okay, but what is really important here? And maybe offered a little bit more trust that like if Earl says, I don't read music as much, but like if you record the show, I will listen to it and I will know it backwards and forwards. Like it's been a really, that process of like discovery and trust,
Mm-hmm.
I think has been so lovely to be a part of. Cause like, I know I was all nervous, and then Earl came in that second rehearsal and like knew the score.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's just,
he's extremely talented. And Earl's from Baltimore as well. So like Billy is very much a part of who he is, and he's grown up listening to her music as well. So he really understood the sound that had to happen. It was just a matter of, in the time of COVID, I think you say like, we're going to work with what we have, and we're going to make great with what we have. And that's what we ended up doing.
Mhm. A little like fun aside, speaking of working with what we have. Cherish, will you talk folks just a little bit of like juicy COVID process detail about where y'all rehearsed for the first week of
Oh,
rehearsals? I know it
yes.
seems like ancient history now, but how we
Yeah.
make do with what we have.
It was extremely important that all safety precautions were taken. So we were tested every single week before rehearsals. And then when we did rehearsals, we had to do rehearsals at the lovely cast house. But we did it on the back deck. We had the piano out there, we had our music out there, Lynn had her table, we had all of our notes, and the neighbors were just kind of sometimes occasionally looking like, what is going on over there? But we rehearsed outside for quite some time, and majority of the time it was lovely. Occasionally it got very hot, um, but yeah, those were in the time of COVID. Rehearsal looks very, very different than what it would ever have been before.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the equity had changed. The actors union had changed their regulations a little bit about inspections of HVAC systems. So we didn't get permission to be in the building for about the first week and a half of rehearsal. But I think, as Chair said, it's really this time has stretched our ideas of what we're capable of and what we really need, like what those core elements are. So something, Cherish, that you said earlier when you were speaking about your sort of relationship with Billy, with Lady Day, I'm interested in what it is to play um, an iconic individual, and also an iconic individual who so many folks know through listening to her songs. So there are people who know her voice so well, and you also know that some folks in the audience, some folks may never have heard her, and other folks may have been listening to her since they were very small. And so, what was that like for you in rehearsal, the balance between honoring her and finding your own way? And what is that like now that you're in performance?
Yeah. So Lynn and I, before rehearsals had even started, we went and had breakfast. And we just had a really in-depth conversation about what this show needed to be and how we were best going to be able to tell this remarkable woman's story. And I knew with the way she speaks and the way she sings, there's just no way to completely and totally mimic her. It will sound just like that. So we have both agreed that we weren't going to imitate, we were going to celebrate. And so a lot of what Lynn just pushed me in over and over and over again is she goes, it's in the text, it's in the text, it's in the music. And so every single song I would pick apart and look at what is the story behind this song. And that's what made it easier for me to understand when she does those little bit of a lifts, or when she is heavier in either in her heart or in her spirit or physically, because this might have been a song that she sang when she was not sober. Um, and so just picking that completely and totally picking that all apart, and then being able to go through all of it and realize verbally what was the story, and then adding rhythm and adding music to it, made it a lot easier for me to understand in my head. I've listened to Billy my whole life. And if you ever have listened to her speaking voice versus her singing voice, it's very different. And I knew her speaking voice. My voice does not go to that register, not without hurting myself. And I didn't want to do that. So I tried to, with the spoken portion of the script, make it a lot more song-like. So it's almost as if I switched it. I tried to make the songs a lot more like a story verbally, but with rhythm and melody. And I tried to make her scripted part, or just the language, a little bit more like a song. So she still has a lot of how she says things. It sounds like poetry to me. it's different because the way she speaks, and where she is in her life and where she is even in the region is a little different. Some of these words, like, I've never heard some of these words before. Lynn and I were going through some of these things. I'm like, what is that? What does that mean? And so, like, one of the lines that she says, she's talking about her mom, and she says, well, she didn't have truck with no one. And I was like, what does that mean? She's like, she didn't sleep with anybody except for her dad and this person. And so learning some of that language too, helped a lot in just kind of figuring out what poetry happens with that, in the script, in the text. So I switched them, so that in my head I could be able to produce and celebrate who she was, because she was not just a singer, and not just a performer and a really good storyteller, but she was a poet. A lot of what she said, like even in telling just stories through her life, you could just sit and listen to her all day. And it just sounded so rhythmically good and vocally good with each inflection. And so that helped me a lot when it came to the text.
I love that. It's something interesting to think, because I thought about this a little bit before, because the play was originally written and performed in like 1986, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about that a lot. And Cherish, you mentioned, that what is described in the play, the lyrics to Strange Fruit. I mean, everything feels like it speaks clear through to 2021 in a way
Mm-hmm.
that is gives us a lot to think about, and is really sad and
Mm-hmm.
damaging, and should inspire some introspection and action on behalf of all of us. But something I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it in the specific language, or the regionalisms, is also that, like, the play was written 30 years after the action that it shows,
Mm-hmm.
Billie Holiday towards the end of her life. And now it's been another over 30 years since that play was written. And so um, we are, as audience members and as artists, further from the original action of the play than it would have been when it was originally performed. So there's like more distance in some of the specifics that we have to cross. And so sort of wrestling with that and making sure that's really clear to the audience when maybe not everything sits naturally in your body and voice and brain. There's an extra level of challenge that I hadn't thought about before.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's
Tricky.
part of like why, and because again, there is so much that can, relate to even, several decades before this. I think that's why the story is still important. And I think that's why people still want to hear it, because the issue is it's not resolved. So until the issue is resolved, or until we're able to see like, oh, that was history, people still want to hear the story.
Yeah. Until racism and anti-blackness are things that we actually can say. Well,
Yeah,
solve that.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What I'd love to hear a little bit about, and then I'm going to open it up to questions or things that other folks want to think about. And this is a little bit more of like a technical question, but I'm always curious. Cherish, is there a way that you approach, and I'm thinking specifically like the night or the day of a role like this, just from, I'm thinking from like a carrying yourself like emotionally and physically all the way through a play. And for those of you who have seen Lady Day already, it is, I mean, Earl is there to support and there's interplay, but it is you telling this story and sustaining for like 80 minutes straight, and it goes to some very dark places. Are there rituals or ways of preparing either before or after that you like to engage in order to put yourself in that place, but also keep yourself feeling like emotionally and physically healthy?
Yeah. When I'm in the dressing room, I always play all my diva music. I have a diva, just a diva playlist, and there's Celine Dion, there's Billie Holiday, and there's Whitney Houston, and there's Ma Rainey. Like there's all of the Barbara Streisand. All my divas are all like in a room, and I make everybody jam with me. It's very important that everybody has a really good time. before we start the show, so I can just get my energy up and my energy going. And I just, from that point on, I'll go ahead and I'll turn my my stereo off, and just start to kind of, as I'm getting into costume and as I'm putting on my earrings, I am just like, okay, Billy, I'm just gonna tell your story. I just need you to help me tell your story. Just let me just be very honest with what you have going on. And I grab my dog and we head out into the stage. Earl meets me at the very corner, stage left, and we walk down hand in hand together, and we get ready to start. And our stage manager kind of just lets us know where we're at, and we pray before every single show. It is very important. It is something I have always done in every show. It is just important that I thank the higher above for everything that I have been given, and just express my gratitude that I'm able to do it, that my body is physically able to do it, that my mind is able to do it, that my voice and my vocal cords, all of that, are able to still do this. I just give a lot of gratitude. I take a really big breath before I go on stage, and in my head, because before I would have terrible nerves and terrible stage fright, and not for this show, but just previously in my career. And I would psych myself out, and I just say, everyone wants you to win. Everyone wants you to do great. And I just remind myself of that. I'll go and I'll do the entire show. And at the end of the show, I'm pretty exhausted. The end is very heavy, and it's a lot. And I'll go ahead and we'll finish, we'll do our bows. I go back into my room and I have a notebook, and I will list out 5 things that I am grateful for. Just moments of gratitude. I'm grateful I can breathe. I'm grateful for birds. I'm grateful I had a good dinner. I'm grateful, just all the things to just help me kind of get myself out of, that's not your life. Because it's pretty, for some of us who have been in this world, it's very easy to put yourself into somebody's world, so that you can play this part. And sometimes it's really difficult to get out of that. And it can be very dangerous. So taking that minute to just put those 5 things I'm grateful for, whatever it is, I'm grateful for my family members. I'm grateful that it was hot today and I didn't feel like being cold. And just to kind of bring myself back into reality and pack her away so that I can go ahead and bring her out for the next night, but recognize that this is my life still. I'm honoring somebody else, but because of everything that she's gone through, it is really important that I take myself out of that before I leave that dressing room. So that is my full-on ritual. It helps tremendously. I had gotten that idea from my therapist, and I was just like, hey, I'm getting ready to play this really difficult role. I am a little worried about my mental health just because of everything that this woman has gone through, and I'm having to get really deep into some of these things. And so she had given me that idea, and she's like, okay, so we have to figure out a way to realistically get your brain out of that. And that has been very helpful for me.
Oh, I love that. Like my wheels are turning on integrating that into my personal practice. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Cherish.
Yeah.
So I have like a bajillion things that I could also ask, but I want to pause for a second and see whether any of the lovely folks that are not me here in this room have anything that they'd like to reflect on or ask you to reflect on a bit more.
Did Billy ever sing Strange Fruit in the South, or was it mostly northern cities where she performed that?
She did sing Strange Fruit in the South. She was often stopped. If they started to hear the bit of the melody of that song, these full-on grown men would literally take her out, and would tackle her, because they did not want her to sing that song. But I know she did sing it in the South a few times, but majority of the time she would be interrupted, or there would be occasions where they wouldn't even let her in. to whatever establishment it was going to be in, because they did not want her to sing that song. They were very afraid of a revolt.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
I am curious to know how you wound up studying in Australia. What led to that?
Yeah, so my school in Greeley, Colorado had like a sisterhood partnership with the theater in Australia. And you just needed to apply and send in an audition and send in a tape. And I knew I wanted to study abroad. I just didn't know where. And I knew it was going to be really difficult to do theater, especially if it was going to be in a language that I didn't know. So it had just happened to work out perfectly. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, we'll be able to speak the same language. I'll be able to understand the text. And Australia is a beautiful country. And there were a couple of applicants, but my video had been chosen. And so I studied there for seven months.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
And they have a phenomenal theater there, and wonderful theater companies, and the university is also really amazing.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
So Cheerish, did you say that you're worked with children at a community center?
So I have not worked with children in the community center for a while. I've been asked to speak at a couple of different centers. So the Chinook Center, I've been to a couple of times. The Boys and Girls Club, the one located over by Carmel Middle School, I've been there a couple of times. And then I have gotten to go to my high school, not recently, about 2 years ago, when I was playing in the, I think it was Funky Little Theater Company. So I've gotten to go there, and some of the teachers or some of the kids will ask, like, how do I get to do something like this? Or how do I get to, be a part of something like this? And some of the parents are pretty interested as well, in just like not knowing quite how to get their kids involved in it, but knowing that their kids either have a lot of personality for it, or that their kids need something to do. And so those are a couple of the places that I've been, and then actually work at Children's Hospital now. So I try to bring a little bit of what I do in the theater world into the hospital as well. I haven't been able to be very successful right now because of COVID, but I do foresee that being a pretty big thing later on.
So you live in Denver?
No, the Children's Hospital here at Briargate.
Oh, okay.
The new one up there.
Nice.
Something that didn't come when Cheerish spoke of her high school too, that I didn't include in the bio, is that Cheerish, you went to high school, you grew up here in the Springs, and so you went to Sierra High School.
Yeah. Both
Yeah.
Lynn and I are Sierra High School graduates.
Mm-hmm. Which I imagine when you went to speak at young people in high school, that can help be an extra like solidification of possibility, right? To hear that not only is someone an artist, but also someone who went to your same schools, and has felt that your trajectory becomes more possible to folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for Sierra is really big in athletics. We've got a phenomenal football team and a great basketball team. And they, make a lot of moves in those departments. But it was really important to me that, kids who maybe didn't have that talent or weren't interested in that and were interested in something else, were able to see like, this is also an option. And Mrs. Chauvin, who is now their principal, but was their drama teacher. And now she leads their school, and she has done a phenomenal job in making sure that their theater department is still pretty well funded, to the best of her ability.
Wow. I feel like I've never heard of the drama teacher to principal trajectory before.
It was really cool when I had heard she had gotten the position. So I was really excited for her.
Yeah. That's amazing. So I have I have a small question. If does anyone else who hasn't gotten to ask a question yet have something simmering for them? So for the folks, Cherish, who have yet to see the play, who are maybe gonna come this weekend, is there any like not a big thing, but is there any like little moments that often gives you a thrill or tends to bring you joy when you're performing Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill that you would want to like give as a gift to folks who are about to see it to maybe look out for and know, oh, this is a bit that you know.
Yeah, I think having her personality play in the music is probably my favorite little pieces. And just being able to, she was a very playful person and she could work a crowd. So being able to do that in the music is, I think, one of my favorite parts. That and when she talks about her mom. They had a very interesting relationship. And so when she talks about her mom, just being able to see like that mother-daughter love is, I'm very close with my mother. And so being able to kind of just play off of that, even knowing the truth of what their relationship was, brings me a lot of joy because I think the relationship between her and her mom brings her a lot of joy. So yeah, the music, and when she kind of just shines in especially Moonlight and All of Me are really, really good ones. And then I think maybe even Pig's Foot is a really good one too, because her idol was Ma Rainey. So her watching, like, that was very cool. Being able to play Billy, who also was playing somebody else, was very cool. There's a lot of dynamics to that.
Yeah, and getting to trace that musical lineage and musical inspiration as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Watching out for little details. I didn't realize until having experienced this show that because she mentions that she wrote God Bless the Child for her mother. And I didn't realize, Mike is nodding as well, I didn't realize that Billy had written some of the songs that she had sung.
Yeah.
And so getting to hear more and reflect on that part of her artistry was really inspiring as well.
Yeah, that's that definite poetry that's there.
You have many, so there is a special guest star in.
There is.
Is he about? We don't want
He
to.
is. I'll have to. He's escaped. But he's a small little tiny thing over there. Little. So that's Peppy. That his given name is Tux, but he plays Peppy in the show, and so he's a Pekingese poodle. He's 7 pounds, and he does a wonderful job. And he's got quite this diva attitude now. Ever since he's been in the show, he doesn't really want to come out on the stage if there's not an audience there to greet him. So.
I have to say that in the midst of, because he makes his appearance as the show is beginning to take its turn, not that it hasn't had serious threads, but as those threads come together, and to hear that little gasp in the audience as they realize, oh, the dog is a real dog. It's such a treat. I feel like we are our most often are as audience members, our sort of young child's open-hearted selves when there's an animal on stage.
Yes, there's always, and it's his show. I've done all the work, but really you couldn't convince him otherwise. And so he brings a lot of life and a lot of love to the show.
He does. We'll have to, as we were joking about other shows with pets in them and having to find other roles in future productions for Tux to make sure that now that he's gotten the stage bug, that he has other opportunities to explore this side of himself.
Yes, he will love it. He loves all the adornment.
Perfect. Well, lovely folks. Does anyone else have anything that they want to sort of put into the room? Sheila's leaning forward.
I can't wait to see.
She can't wait
Yeah.
to see it. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Very
Question,
excited for this last one.
Yeah.
what's your next project that you've got lined up?
Yeah, so I'm actually in working the musical at the Fine Arts Center. So that'll be, I have 2 days of a break and then I go right back into rehearsal.
I was about to say that's starting real soon, Cher.
Yeah. Yeah, that is how much I have missed theater.
Mhm. I love that. Oh, I'm very excited for that piece. That makes me even more excited.
Yeah, it should be really good.
Ah, all right, lovely folks. This has been a delight. I want to thank all of you lovely subscribers for hanging out with us. And of course, I want to thank and celebrate Cheerish for spending a bit of a truly prized night away from the theater, talking about the theater with all of us over Zoom. Thank you, Cheerish.
Boris, thank you all so much. Thank you for having me. I have really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. All right, lovely people, shall we wave ourselves off into the evening? Goodbye, everyone. Lovely to see
Bye-bye.
you. Have
See
a
you at the
great night.
theater.
See you at the theater.
See you at the theater.
Bye.
Bye-bye.